Sometimes the smallest accident reveals the deepest loneliness, but only a person with true character knows when to quietly look away. On a cool Tuesday morning in downtown Chicago, Ethan Walker parked his aging pickup truck beside the polished glass headquarters of Hayes Dynamics, one of the largest technology companies in the country. At 39 years old, he had learned that appearances rarely told the whole story. His faded blue work shirt had been washed hundreds of times, his leather toolbox carried years of honest labor, and the coffee in the paper cup beside him had already gone cold during the morning traffic. None of those things bothered him. The only thing on his mind was finishing the repair before 3 o'clock, so he could pick up his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, from school exactly as he had promised. Inside the towering lobby, polished marble reflected the soft morning sunlight, while employees hurried toward elevators with tablets, laptops, and business meetings filling their schedules. Ethan quietly signed the visitor log before being greeted by Grace Donovan, the executive assistant to the company's chief executive officer. "Mr. Walker, thank you for coming on such short notice," Grace said with a professional smile. "The laptop belongs to Miss Victoria Hayes. It stopped responding after an operating system failure. Our internal team recovered most of the business files, but several encrypted folders refused to open." Ethan nodded politely. "I will do everything I can." Grace escorted him into an elegant executive office overlooking the Chicago skyline. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed miles of steel and glass buildings beneath a bright autumn sky. The office reflected success in every direction, yet something about the silence inside felt unexpectedly empty. Victoria Hayes entered moments later wearing a perfectly tailored navy business suit. At 38 years old, she carried herself with remarkable confidence, but there was a quiet weariness hidden behind her composed expression that most people would never notice. She extended her hand. "Thank you for coming so quickly." Ethan shook her hand with calm professionalism. "It is my pleasure." Victoria placed a sleek silver laptop on the desk. "Everything important is backed up except several personal folders. If they cannot be recovered, I will accept it. I just wanted someone experienced to take one last look." Ethan opened the computer without unnecessary conversation. Years of repairing damaged systems had taught him that machines often revealed their secrets to patient hands rather than hurried ones. He connected specialized recovery equipment, carefully bypassed corrupted startup files, and quietly monitored thousands of digital records rebuilding themselves line by line across the screen. Minutes passed in complete silence except for the gentle hum of cooling fans and distant city traffic beyond the windows. Victoria excused herself to attend an executive meeting, leaving Ethan alone inside the office. He continued working with complete concentration, restoring fragmented documents, recovering temporary directories, and carefully reconstructing damaged storage indexes. Then something unexpected appeared. During the automatic recovery process, a folder briefly opened before the software reorganized its contents. A single portrait photograph filled the display. It showed Victoria wearing a simple white sweater instead of a business suit, sitting beside a quiet lake during sunset with a natural smile untouched by boardrooms or public expectations. Beneath the image rested an unfinished document that had never been saved completely. Only one sentence appeared before the damaged file froze on screen. "Do you think I am pretty?" Ethan remained perfectly still. He had not searched for personal files. He had not opened private folders intentionally. The recovery software had simply reconstructed unfinished fragments before returning them to their original locations. For a brief moment, he understood that behind the confident billionaire known throughout the business world lived a woman carrying a question no amount of wealth had ever answered. Without reading another word, Ethan immediately closed the window, cleared the temporary preview, and resumed the technical recovery exactly where he had left off. His expression never changed. His curiosity never overcame his respect. Some things were not meant to be seen, and even fewer were meant to be remembered. Nearly an hour later, Victoria returned to find the laptop operating normally once again. Ethan disconnected the recovery equipment, before sliding the computer gently across the desk. "Everything I could recover has been restored," he said quietly. Victoria looked at the screen before lifting her eyes toward him. For just a fraction of a second, she noticed something unusual. The recovery history showed that one damaged personal file had briefly opened during reconstruction. She studied Ethan's calm face, searching for the slightest sign of embarrassment, amusement, or curiosity. She found none. Only quiet professionalism. Only dignity. Only silence. For reasons she could not explain, that silence stayed with her long after Ethan quietly closed his toolbox and prepared to leave. Victoria Hayes waited until the office door closed behind Ethan before slowly opening the recovered laptop once again. Everything appeared exactly where it belonged. Financial reports, engineering presentations, contracts, and encrypted archives had all been restored with remarkable precision. Even the damaged personal folders had quietly returned to their original locations. She clicked through several directories before finally stopping at the unfinished document that had remained untouched since the recovery process. The single sentence still waited there exactly as she had left it weeks earlier. "Do you think I am pretty?" She stared at the words without touching the keyboard. It was a question she had never intended for another person to read. It had not been written for social media, an interview, or even a close friend. It had been typed late one evening after another award ceremony where cameras had praised her accomplishments while nobody had looked beyond the expensive suit and carefully rehearsed smile. She quietly closed the document again before pressing the intercom. "Grace, would you come in for a moment?" Grace Donovan entered carrying a tablet. "Is everything working now?" Victoria nodded. "Perfectly." She hesitated before asking, "Did Mr. Walker mention seeing anything unusual during the repair?" Grace looked genuinely confused. "No, he only explained which system files had been damaged and how he restored them." Victoria thanked her, but the question refused to disappear from her thoughts. Later that afternoon, she reviewed the automated recovery history herself. The software log confirmed exactly what she already suspected. One damaged personal file had briefly opened during the reconstruction process before being closed less than 2 seconds later. No additional folders have been accessed. No photographs have been enlarged. No personal documents have been searched. No files have been copied. Whoever repaired the computer had looked away almost immediately. Victoria leaned back in her chair, unable to remember the last time someone had chosen restraint when curiosity would have been easier. Meanwhile, Ethan carefully drove through afternoon traffic toward Lily's elementary school. The familiar streets felt far more important than the polished skyscrapers he had left behind. Children poured through the front entrance carrying colorful backpacks, while parents waved from nearby sidewalks. Lily spotted the old pickup truck almost immediately and ran toward it with an enormous smile. Ethan stepped out before she reached him. "How was your day?" he asked. Lily grinned proudly. "I got 100% on my spelling test." Ethan laughed softly. "I knew you would." As they drove home, Lily talked excitedly about art class, playground games, and a science project she hoped to build over the weekend. Ethan listened with complete attention, asking questions and celebrating every small accomplishment as though nothing else in the world deserved more importance. The expensive office, the billionaire executive, and the unfinished sentence hidden inside the laptop slowly disappeared beneath the simple happiness of an ordinary afternoon. After dinner, Lily spread colored paper across the kitchen table, while Ethan repaired a small desk lamp for one of the neighbors. "Daddy," Lily asked without looking up from her drawing. "Yes. Why do people like you?" Ethan smiled as he tightened the final screw. "I do not know if everyone does." Lily shook her head confidently. "Miss Carter says everybody smiles when you come to school." Ethan thought for a moment before answering. "Maybe people remember how you make them feel more than what you say." Lily nodded thoughtfully before returning to her drawing. Across the city, Victoria sat alone inside her high-rise apartment, overlooking thousands of glowing lights stretching toward the horizon. Her home was beautiful, peaceful, and impossibly quiet. She poured herself a cup of tea before opening her laptop one more time. Her fingers hovered above the unfinished sentence, but she could not bring herself to delete it. Instead, another thought quietly entered her mind. The man who had accidentally discovered her deepest insecurity had protected it without expecting recognition, gratitude, or reward. For the first time in many years, Victoria realized that genuine respect was often measured not by what people chose to say, but by what they chose to leave unsaid. 3 days passed, yet the quiet repair inside Victoria Hayes's office refused to disappear from her thoughts. She attended board meetings, approved investment proposals, reviewed quarterly forecasts, and answered interviews with the same calm confidence the business world expected from her. But every so often her mind drifted back to a man who had been given an opportunity to satisfy his curiosity and had quietly chosen respect instead. That decision seemed strangely rare. Late Thursday afternoon, after another long executive meeting, Victoria stood beside the wide windows overlooking downtown Chicago before speaking softly to Grace Donovan. "Could you help me find something?" Grace looked up from her tablet. "Of course." Victoria hesitated for a brief moment. "I would like to know more about Mr. Walker." Grace smiled politely. "Business background?" Victoria shook her head. "Nothing invasive, just whatever is publicly connected to his work." By the following morning, Grace returned carrying only a thin folder. Victoria immediately noticed how little information it contained. There were no magazine interviews, no social media promotions, no personal websites celebrating achievements, and no advertisements calling him the best technician in the city. There was only a simple business registration, excellent customer reviews, and several letters of appreciation from schools, churches, and community organizations. One review caught Victoria's attention. He repaired every computer in our after-school learning center and refused additional payment because he said children should never lose access to education. Another read, "Our elderly residents finally learned how to video call their families because Mr. Walker volunteered every Saturday morning." Victoria slowly closed the folder. Success had taught her that people usually worked hard to be noticed. Ethan seemed to work just as hard to remain unnoticed. Curiosity gently replaced admiration. That Saturday morning, Victoria drove alone to Lincoln Community Learning Center after noticing its name among the recommendation letters. She wore simple casual clothing, tied her hair back, and left the company driver at home. She wanted no attention. Through the open classroom windows, she saw nearly 20 children gathered around folding tables covered with small electronic parts, colorful wires, batteries, and miniature robots. Ethan stood at the front of the room, wearing the same faded blue work shirt, patiently helping every child with exactly the same kindness regardless of how many questions they asked. "Do not worry if it does not work the first time," he said with a warm smile. "Every good engineer learns more from mistakes than easy victories." The children laughed as one tiny robot accidentally rolled off a table before Ethan gently picked it up and handed it back without the slightest frustration. A few minutes later, Lily entered carrying a box of juice and homemade cookies. "Snack break," she announced proudly. The children cheered while Ethan thanked her with obvious affection. He quietly waited until every child had received a cookie before taking one for himself. Victoria remained near the hallway, watching a life completely different from her own. Nobody cared that Ethan drove an old pickup truck. Nobody measured his success by his bank account. Every smiling child around him already knew something many adults had forgotten. Respect could not be purchased. Trust could not be manufactured. Kindness could not be performed for applause. As the class ended, one little boy ran toward Ethan holding a repaired tablet. "Look," he shouted excitedly. "It works again." Ethan knelt until they were at eye level. "I told you we could fix it together." The boy hugged him before running outside to show his grandmother. Victoria quietly smiled without realizing it. She had spent years building one of the country's most successful technology companies. Yet standing in that modest community classroom, she witnessed something her wealth had never guaranteed. Ethan was not simply repairing computers. Every patient lesson, every encouraging word, and every promise he kept was slowly repairing confidence, hope, and trust inside the people around him. As she walked back toward her car beneath the soft autumn sunlight, Victoria understood a truth that lingered far longer than any business success. A person could own an empire and still feel empty, while another could own almost nothing except honesty, love, and quiet dignity, yet somehow become the richest person in every room they entered. Monday morning arrived with crisp autumn air drifting through downtown Chicago, but Victoria Hayes carried an unusual sense of anticipation instead of her usual tightly organized schedule. She had spent the entire weekend thinking about the community classroom, the children, and the quiet confidence that surrounded Ethan Walker wherever he went. It was not admiration built on impressive accomplishments. It was something much simpler and somehow much rarer. It was trust earned through countless ordinary choices. After her first executive meeting ended, Victoria looked toward Grace Donovan. "I need one more favor." Grace closed her notebook. "What can I do?" Victoria paused before answering. "Please ask our cybersecurity department to review the recovery records for my laptop one more time. I do not want assumptions. I only want facts." Grace nodded without asking questions. Within an hour, the company's senior security analyst arrived, carrying a detailed technical report. He placed several printed pages on the conference table before speaking carefully. "We completed a complete forensic review of the repair session." Victoria remained silent. "Every action performed by Mr. Walker has been verified through the system logs. He restored damaged operating files, repaired corrupted storage indexes, recovered encrypted business folders, and tested the hardware. During the automated reconstruction process, one personal image briefly appeared because the recovery software generated a temporary preview. The preview remained open for less than 2 seconds before it was immediately closed. No additional photographs were accessed. No documents were searched. No personal folders were explored. There was no attempt to copy, export, transmit, or preserve any private information." Victoria quietly looked down at the report. "Nothing at all?" The analyst gently shook his head. "Quite honestly, most technicians would have looked longer. Some might even have explored other folders out of curiosity. Mr. Walker didn't either. His digital footprint shows exceptional professional discipline." After the analyst left, the conference room became completely silent. Grace finally spoke. "That is rare." Victoria slowly nodded. "No, that is character." Across town, Ethan spent his afternoon replacing aging desktop computers inside a neighborhood library. He carefully transferred old family photographs from failing hard drives, explained simple security tips to senior citizens, and accepted nothing more than the agreed service fee. Before leaving, the library manager attempted to hand him an additional envelope. "You spent nearly 2 extra hours helping everyone," she said warmly. Ethan smiled and returned the envelope. "Please use it to buy more children's books." The manager watched him leave with quiet admiration. Later that evening, Victoria found herself reading through customer reviews that stretched back nearly 10 years. Every story sounded remarkably similar. He repaired more than expected. He charged less than expected. He treated everyone with respect, whether they lived in a luxury apartment or a modest neighborhood. He arrived when promised. He left without seeking recognition. There were hundreds of comments, yet none described dramatic moments or extraordinary speeches. They described consistency. They described kindness repeated so often that it became ordinary. Victoria leaned back in her chair, suddenly realizing that genuine reputation was never built by one unforgettable day. It was built by thousands of quiet decisions nobody believed were important at the time. She opened the unfinished document once again and looked at the single unanswered question waiting on the screen. This time, instead of wondering whether Ethan had silently judged her appearance, another thought entered her heart. Perhaps the greatest compliment she had ever received was not spoken inside a ballroom or printed in a magazine. Perhaps it was given the moment a stranger chose to protect her dignity when nobody would ever have known if he had done otherwise. And for the first time in many years, that realization felt more valuable than every award displayed inside her office. The question remained inside Victoria Hayes's thoughts long after the computer had been repaired, but now it had changed its meaning completely. It was no longer about appearance. It was about whether someone could truly see the person hidden behind achievement, responsibility, and endless expectations. On Wednesday afternoon, she found herself reviewing invitations for upcoming charity events when one envelope immediately caught her attention. Lincoln Community Learning Center was hosting a family technology fair to raise money for new classroom equipment. Grace Donovan noticed Victoria studying the invitation. "Would you like me to make a donation on behalf of the company?" Victoria gently shook her head. "No, I would like to attend." Grace smiled with quiet surprise. Without the media, especially without the media. Saturday arrived beneath clear blue skies and cool autumn air. The school parking lot slowly filled with families carrying homemade desserts, science projects, and folding chairs. Children laughed while volunteers arranged colorful banners across the playground. Victoria parked several blocks away and walked the remaining distance wearing simple jeans, comfortable walking shoes, and a light gray sweater. Nobody recognized the billionaire executive among the crowd, and for the first time in months, she appreciated the feeling of being just another visitor. Inside the gymnasium, Ethan Walker moved from table to table helping children assemble small robots, repair old keyboards, and test simple coding projects. He encouraged every child with the same patient smile regardless of whether their experiment succeeded or failed. "Take your time," he reminded them. "Learning happens one step at a time." Lily stood nearby, proudly handing out instruction sheets and collecting completed projects with remarkable confidence for an 8-year-old. Victoria quietly wandered through the displays until she stopped beside Lily's table. The little girl looked up with a bright smile. "Would you like to vote for your favorite invention?" Victoria smiled back. "I would love to." Lily handed her a paper ballot decorated with colorful stars. "Everybody gets one vote because every idea matters." Victoria laughed softly. "That sounds very fair." Lily studied her for a moment before asking with innocent curiosity, "Have we met before?" Victoria hesitated only briefly. "Your father fixed something for me recently." Lily's face immediately lit up. "Daddy fixes everything." The answer carried such complete confidence that Victoria could not help smiling. "Does he always stay this busy?" Lily nodded enthusiastically. "He says if somebody trusts you, you should always try your best." She pointed across the room, where Ethan was kneeling beside a little boy struggling with loose wires. "He tells me the computers are easy to fix. People just need someone who believes they can fix them." Victoria quietly watched Ethan encourage the child until the small machine finally blinked to life. The boy raised both hands in celebration, while Ethan applauded louder than anyone else in the room. There was no audience to impress, no executive board watching, and no cameras recording the moment. He celebrated because another child had discovered confidence. Lily looked back toward Victoria with a thoughtful expression. "Daddy says being smart is nice, but being kind lasts longer." The simple sentence settled gently into Victoria's heart. She had spent years surrounding herself with brilliant people, yet she could not remember the last time someone had explained success with such quiet wisdom. As the afternoon sunlight streamed through the gymnasium windows, she realized that Ethan had given his daughter something far more valuable than financial security. He had taught her to measure people by character instead of status, by promises kept instead of titles earned, and by the quiet dignity they offered others when nobody expected anything in return. Standing among ordinary families sharing homemade cookies and science projects, Victoria suddenly understood that this small community possessed a kind of wealth that could never appear on any balance sheet. And for reasons she could not fully explain, she found herself wishing she could become part of it. The following Monday morning, Victoria Hayes arrived at her office carrying a decision that had quietly taken shape over the past several days. She no longer wanted to admire Ethan Walker's character from a distance. She wanted to understand the man whose priorities seemed untouched by wealth, recognition, or influence. After finishing her first meeting, she asked Grace Donovan to place a brief phone call. "Please invite Mr. Walker to have coffee with me this afternoon," she said. "Tell him there is no business emergency. I would simply appreciate the opportunity to thank him properly." Grace reached Ethan between service appointments. He listened politely before answering with genuine regret. Please thank Miss Hayes for the invitation. I am honored, but I cannot make it this afternoon. Grace smiled. May I ask if another time would work better? Ethan glanced at the clock inside his work van. Today is Lily's school music performance. She's been practicing for weeks. I promised her I would be sitting in the front row. I never break promises to my daughter. Grace relayed the message exactly as it had been spoken. Victoria remained silent for several moments after the call ended. She was accustomed to people rearranging entire schedules for a meeting with her. Investors postponed flights. Executives delayed vacations. Consultants accepted late-night conference calls without hesitation. Yet the first person who had ever declined her invitation had done so without disrespect, without hesitation, and without the slightest interest in impressing her. He simply had somewhere more important to be. Late that afternoon, curiosity quietly guided Victoria toward Lily's elementary school. She parked several streets away and entered the auditorium unnoticed among dozens of parents carrying flowers and cameras. The stage was decorated with colorful paper leaves celebrating the arrival of autumn. Folding chairs filled the room, and excited conversations blended with the cheerful laughter of children waiting behind the curtains. Victoria found a seat near the back just as Ethan walked through the entrance. He was still wearing his blue work shirt, and a small tool bag rested over one shoulder, suggesting he had come directly from his final appointment of the day. Before taking his seat, he spotted Lily peeking through the stage curtain. He smiled warmly, placed one hand over his heart, and gave her a confident thumbs up. Lily immediately relaxed, her nervous expression replaced by a bright smile. When the performance began, every parent applauded, but Ethan's attention never wandered. He did not answer phone calls. He did not check messages. He did not glance at the time. Every note Lily sang seemed to matter as much to him as the largest accomplishment in the world. Victoria quietly watched the father and daughter more often than the stage itself. She realized that Ethan measured success differently from nearly everyone she had ever known. Success was not another contract signed before sunset. It was arriving before the curtain opened. It was keeping a promise made to an 8-year-old child. When the concert ended, Lily ran into Ethan's arms holding a small participation ribbon. "Did I do well?" she asked hopefully. Ethan smiled with unmistakable pride. "You did beautifully because you sang with your whole heart." Lily beamed as though she had just received the greatest award imaginable. Standing unnoticed near the exit, Victoria felt something shift quietly inside her own heart. She had spent years believing that extraordinary achievements required extraordinary sacrifices. Yet watching Ethan choose one school concert over an opportunity to meet one of the country's most influential business leaders revealed a different truth. Sometimes the greatest success was simply being exactly where the people who loved you needed you to be. As families slowly left the auditorium beneath the soft glow of evening lights, Victoria understood that the lesson she had witnessed that day could never be taught inside a boardroom, but it might become the most valuable lesson of her entire life. Less than a week after the school concert, Hayes Dynamics faced the kind of challenge that could not be postponed until tomorrow. Shortly after 8 o'clock on a rainy Wednesday morning, engineers filled the company's operations center with worried conversations as several internal development servers unexpectedly stopped communicating with one another after a routine software update. The issue did not affect customers, but hundreds of employees suddenly lost access to critical engineering tools needed for a major product launch scheduled later that week. Victoria Hayes listened carefully as department leaders proposed increasingly complicated solutions. One recommended restoring every server for backup. Another suggested replacing entire storage arrays before attempting another recovery. Hours passed, yet every option seemed to create even greater delays. Victoria quietly looked toward Grace Donovan. "Who repair my laptop?" Grace answered immediately. "Ethan Walker. Victoria Nadif. Please call him. Tell him we need another opinion." Ethan answered while organizing replacement parts inside his work van. After hearing the situation, he calmly replied, "I can stop by for 1 hour before I have to leave." Grace sounded relieved. "Thank you. We appreciate it." Ethan arrived carrying the same worn toolbox that had accompanied him through years of ordinary service calls. Several engineers greeted him politely before explaining everything they had already attempted. Ethan listened without interrupting. He studied the system diagrams, reviewed update logs, and quietly examined several error reports displayed across large monitors. Instead of focusing on the obvious failures, he searched for the smallest detail everyone else had overlooked. After several minutes, he asked a simple question. Did anyone compare the synchronization time between the backup controller and the primary storage controller after the update? The room became silent. One engineer admitted they had assumed both systems remained synchronized automatically. Ethan smiled gently. Assumptions are useful until they become expensive. He requested permission to review the configuration files himself. Working patiently beside the engineering team, he identified a single timing conflict created during the software update. The servers were healthy. The storage systems were healthy. The security settings were healthy. They simply disagreed with one another by a fraction of a second, causing every authentication request to fail. Ethan adjusted the synchronization settings, restarted one service, and quietly stepped back. One by one, the monitors across the room returned to normal. Engineers watched their systems reconnect almost instantly. Conversations of concern were replaced by relieved smiles. One senior engineer laughed softly. We spent 4 hours looking for a complicated answer when the solution was sitting in front of us. Ethan shrugged modestly. Technology usually rewards patience more than speed. Victoria approached him with sincere appreciation. You saved us an incredible amount of time. Ethan smiled politely. Your team did the hard work. I only noticed one missing piece. Grace handed him an envelope containing a generous consulting payment that reflected the urgency of the request. Ethan accepted only the original service fee listed on his invoice before returning the remaining amount. That is more than fair, he explained kindly. The problem did not take very long to solve. Victoria looked at him with quiet disbelief. Many consultants measured their value by how much they could charge during a crisis. Ethan measured his by honesty. As he closed his toolbox, his phone displayed the time. He smiled apologetically. If there is nothing else, I should leave now. Lily finishes her after-school science club in 45 minutes, and traffic will be heavy because of the rain. Victoria nodded with understanding. Of course. Ethan thanked everyone, wished the engineering team a successful product launch, and walked toward the elevator without waiting for applause or recognition. Standing inside the operations center, Victoria watched the doors quietly close behind him. Surrounded by brilliant engineers, sophisticated technology, and one of the most successful companies in America, she realized that the greatest strength she had witnessed all week was not exceptional intelligence alone. It was the rare combination of remarkable ability, unwavering humility, and the quiet certainty that no professional achievement would ever become more important than the promise of being there when a little girl walked out of school looking for her father. Several days after the systems at Hayes Dynamics had returned to normal, Victoria Hayes realized that every meaningful conversation she had experienced recently somehow led back to Ethan Walker. His name appeared not because he sought recognition, but because other people could not stop talking about the quiet difference he made in their lives. One Friday afternoon, Grace Donovan entered Victoria's office carrying a small envelope that had arrived with the morning mail. This was forwarded from the Community Learning Center, Grace explained. They thought you might enjoy seeing it. Inside the envelope was a handmade thank you card signed by several children who had attended the technology workshops. Colorful drawings of tiny robots, smiling faces, and bright stars filled every corner of the page. Near the bottom, Lily Walker had written in careful handwriting, "Thank you for believing in our ideas." Victoria smiled gently before tracing the words with her fingertips. She decided to visit the Learning Center again that weekend, this time bringing several boxes of educational supplies without announcing who had donated them. Ethan was helping parents organize folding tables. When he noticed her approaching, he smiled warmly. "Miss Hayes, it is nice to see you again." Victoria returned the smile. "I thought the children might enjoy a few new science kits." Ethan looked inside the boxes before quietly thanking her. They will be excited. You did not have to do this. Perhaps I wanted to. Before Ethan could answer, several children rushed toward the new supplies with joyful excitement. Lily followed close behind and immediately recognized Victoria. You came back, she said happily. Victoria laughed softly. I did. Lily carefully helped carry one of the smaller boxes into the classroom before looking up with innocent curiosity. Daddy says you are very smart. Victoria smiled. Your father is very kind. Lily nodded as though that answer made perfect sense. They spent the next hour helping children assemble beginner robotics kits and simple coding games. Victoria enjoyed watching Ethan encourage every child with endless patience, never raising his voice, never rushing anyone, always celebrating effort before success. As the afternoon came to an end, most families slowly returned home. Lily remained behind, organizing markers and notebooks with surprising determination. Victoria knelt beside her to help stack colorful folders. You work very hard, Victoria said. Lily grinned. Daddy says if you help clean up, you're thanking everybody without using words. Victoria smiled at the familiar wisdom. After a quiet moment, Lily looked toward the empty classroom door before lowering her voice. Can I tell you something? Victoria nodded gently. Of course. Lily spoke with complete sincerity. Daddy was really quiet after he fixed your computer. Victoria's heart skipped slightly, but she remained calm. Was he? Lily nodded. I asked him if something bad happened. She paused before repeating his exact words. He told me that sometimes you accidentally see something that belongs to another person's heart, and when that happens, the kindest thing you can do is protect it like it was never yours to see. Victoria felt every word settle deeply inside her heart. Lily continued innocently, unaware of the impact her words carried. Daddy said, everybody has private questions they are still trying to answer, and they deserve to feel safe while they find those answers. Victoria lowered her eyes for a brief moment as emotion quietly filled the silence between them. Ethan had never mentioned the photograph. He had never repeated the unfinished sentence. He had never tried to earn trust by telling anyone about the moment they unknowingly shared. Instead, he had transformed it into a lesson about kindness for his daughter. As soft afternoon sunlight drifted through the classroom windows, Victoria finally understood what had happened the day her laptop was repaired. Ethan had answered the question she had never intended anyone to read, not with compliments about beauty or reassuring words, but with an act of respect so complete that it protected her dignity before she even knew she needed protecting. And in that quiet realization, the lonely sentence that had lived unanswered inside her computer for so long finally began to lose its weight. Autumn slowly gave way to early winter, and with the changing season came a quiet announcement that surprised employees, educators, and community leaders throughout Chicago. Hayes Dynamics introduced a new initiative called the Walker Innovation Fellowship, a program dedicated to providing computers, technical education, and mentorship to children from families who could not easily afford those opportunities. The company invited teachers, volunteers, nonprofit organizations, and local families to a modest celebration inside the Community Learning Center where so many small dreams had first begun. Ethan Walker accepted the invitation only after asking one simple question. Will this require me to spend less time with Lily? Grace Donovan smiled warmly. Miss Hayes specifically requested that your family always comes first. Ethan nodded. Then I would be honored to help. On the afternoon of the ceremony, the classroom looked brighter than ever. New computers lined freshly painted tables. Shelves overflowed with robotics kits, programming books, and science projects waiting for curious young minds. Children filled the room with excited laughter while parents quietly thanked volunteers for believing in their families. Victoria Hayes stood near the front beside a simple podium instead of a grand stage. She wanted the day to celebrate hope rather than status. When everyone settled into their seats, she looked across the room until her eyes found Ethan and Lily sitting together in the second row. Lily smiled proudly and waved. Victoria returned the gesture before beginning her remarks. Many people believe innovation begins with extraordinary ideas, she said calmly. I have learned that it often begins with ordinary kindness repeated every single day. The room became completely still. Several months ago, I met a man who repaired a computer. That sounds like a very ordinary story. But what he truly repaired was something I did not realize had been quietly broken for many years. He reminded me that respect is not measured by what we choose to say when people are watching. It is measured by what we quietly choose not to do when nobody else will ever know. Ethan lowered his eyes with gentle humility while the audience listened in thoughtful silence. Victoria continued, "This fellowship carries the Walker name because one person showed me that knowledge becomes meaningful only when it is guided by character, patience, and compassion." She invited Ethan to stand beside her, but instead of delivering a speech, he simply thanked everyone for supporting the children. "Technology changes every year," he said softly. "Kindness never becomes outdated. If these students learn both, they will build a better future than any of us can imagine." The audience responded with warm applause that felt sincere rather than ceremonial. After the celebration ended, families gathered around the new computers while children eagerly explored their first programming lessons. Lily walked over to Victoria carrying a small handmade bookmark decorated with colorful stars. "I made this for you," she said. Victoria accepted it with genuine gratitude. Written across the front in careful handwriting were the words, "You always deserve kindness." Victoria smiled as emotion quietly filled her eyes. Months earlier, an unfinished sentence hidden inside a damaged computer had asked a question born from loneliness. She had spent years searching for an answer in success, recognition, and accomplishment. Yet the answer had arrived through the quiet actions of a single father who never realized he had been answering it all along. Ethan had never judged her appearance. He had never tried to earn her trust with impressive words. He had simply protected her dignity when it was most vulnerable, and then continued living with the same honesty he offered everyone else. As evening sunlight streamed gently through the classroom windows, children laughed while parents talked, volunteers cleaned tables, and new dreams quietly began to take shape. No dramatic announcement changed the moment. No extraordinary celebration was needed. Sometimes the greatest miracles arrive without applause, because the truest form of redemption is found when one quiet act of respect gives another person the courage to believe they have always been worthy of it.